This week, the church invites us to reflect and meditate on our own vocation. Each one of us has his or her own role to play in this world. As we heard in the first reading, God is calling Isaiah to be his prophet. The gospel, Jesus is calling Peter and some others to be his disciples. The second reading we heard, Paul is telling that he is also called to be an apostle of Christ. In the Bible, we see some kind of pattern or a model in the stories of calling. First, God confronts a person in a situation of crisis. Secondly, God calls the same person in a situation where he could execute his will message. Thirdly, there is a refusal from the person whom God has called because there is some kind of inadequacy or uncertainty or fear from the person. And fourth, there is assurance of God's protection. And finally, God gives a sign for his calling. This pattern we can see throughout the book of the Bible. Prophet Isaiah experiences today in the first reading. It was his personal experience that he sees in a vision. And it's not a kind of public or for all this experience. He's undergoing this personal experience. So also Saint Paul. In the Gospel, the evangelist Luke narrates a beautiful and dramatic story of Jesus calling his own first disciples. This story takes place at the Sea of Galilee because fishing was a popular occupation on the Sea of Galilee. It was a common occupation for the people residing at the shore of these lakes, also the villages of Capernaum and Bethsaida, because they were located at the seashore. Living on these shores, there was abundant catch of fish, and so people were doing mostly of this kind of occupation of fishing and dealing with the fish than other kind of farming. Almost the whole town was doing the same occupation. This message for us, the gospel reading presents today, is of the disciples were called to follow Jesus, to be called to be fishers for people. Jesus or Luke used this metaphor of fishing because people in those areas, in those villages will be able to easily understand what this metaphor is saying about. Also, they were all numerous fishermen were living on these shores, and from this area, Jesus calls his first disciples. The people in Jesus' days, commonly, they were having many struggles both politically and economically. They were occupied by Romans. They were not able to freely live in their own homeland. Most probably, they had jobs, but they were not sufficient to support their own families. They were faithful Jews, but at the same time, they were faced with a lot of corruption from their own leaders. The people at this time immediately wanted a Messiah. They wanted hope. They needed to see that God was at their side, even though they were undergoing some trials in their life. So they pressed on Jesus, as the gospel says. They wanted to listen to Jesus. Perhaps it was their vulnerable situation easily to leave their own jobs, to leave their fishing work and follow Jesus. The disciples followed Jesus finally. Today, we are also called to follow Jesus from our own situation, from our own vocation. We have our own vocation. We have chosen a way of life. Some are called to be singles, some are individuals, some are parents, some are husbands, wife, some children. Some have our own jobs to do. Some of us have our own works to support our own families. Some are still students. Some are still children growing. But all of us have our own responsibilities, our own duties and obligations. All the time, we would not have experienced the same kind of situation. We would not have experienced success. We would not have experienced positive moments and results and prosperity in our life. There would have been ups and downs. There would have been failures and disappointments. Peter says to Jesus in today's gospel, Master, we toiled the whole night and caught nothing. It was a great disappointment and frustration for this experienced fisherman, Peter, and for others. They caught absolutely nothing. The families of these fishermen would go hungry that day. There was a sense of hopelessness and despair. In their misery and crisis, Jesus approaches and tells them, "Put out in the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And so they did. At the words of Jesus, they let their net down. The gospel writer says, to their great surprise, they caught a fish in abundance, unusual catch of fish, more than they could imagine. You and I have tried again and again in our life. Also in another way, we have experienced also maybe the same kind of situation. A sense of hopelessness, a sense of failure, disappointment and despair. Let's approach Jesus today. Let's ask Jesus today to bless us with His words of encouragement in the burdens of our own life, to bless our labor, to bless our employment, the frightening and overwhelming situations of our life, to bless in our fruitless efforts, in our work. Many of us are losing our jobs. At the words of Jesus, let's be reassured of our job and prosperity, especially also in our relationship, when there is no hope of reconciliation, when the relationship are at the verge of breaking. Let's ask Jesus. At the words of Jesus, let's try once again to reunite, to reconstruct our own broken relationship. When the children are not able to understand or study well better, let's try one more time. At the words of Jesus, may they be enlightened more and more with wisdom and understanding and knowledge. Also when we are sick, ailing, and we are suffering from various sicknesses and diseases, let's ask Jesus. At the words of Jesus, may we all be healed from our own sicknesses and diseases. May the powerful word of Jesus, may the miraculous word of Jesus encourage us, support us, protect us, and bless us today and every day of our life. Amen. Last week we had the presentation of the DDF, the Diocesan Development Fund, as a continuation or as a reminder. And we could see in the bulletin of today, the contributors who have done more than $500, their names have been published in the newsletter of this week. And as we go, it will be added. And we also thank for the contribution and for your support and your participation in the last week. So almost out of 5,000 registered families, we have 800 pledges that have been made in the last week. Also, those of you who would like to make or who was not here last week, may take your time now. Maybe you may find the envelopes in front of you, the pews, and you may take them and you may make your pledges at this time. And you may drop it during the time of offertory when the offertory boxes are being supported in your pews. And also we encourage you more and more. We have about 5,000 registered families and 800 members have been pledged. 800 families have pledged. And in 2 years our pastor wants to construct the church for us. And so he is insisting us to make more pledges so that it goes into a Diocesan Development Fund and it will go tax-free and it will come back to our own church. Also today I am here to motivate, also to encourage you to make pledges for those people, those who have not made in the past week. May God bless you and support you in all your works. Amen.